Do you know what you are meaning right now by introspection?
For me, I think it is having experiences, what I would consider spiritual experiences, and wanting to dive deep into what their meaning is about, and whether or not I should do something different or do something better or do something.
Yeah. Because the way that there's a really good question and discussion in there. So what is introspection really? How does it come to us? And how do we actually know if we choose to introspect? Because that's the proper way to use that word. I mean, it could be a noun, but we're speaking of it like it's almost a verb, right? To introspect. Because it can be everything, which is how your question was worded when it first came online. Now I'm remembering. Either just chatter, and this is what you were asking there. How do we know? Is it just our mind doing what the mind likes to do? You didn't ask it this way. But is it chatter? Is it us creating it? And tell me if I'm far off from what you're thinking, or is what's coming to us that would have us want to take a deeper look at it, intuition? Is it coming from a higher place, or is it coming from the mind? Is that, okay, I want to make sure. And that's the question. That's the very hard question. I often say, and I remember it very clearly, but Swamiji writes about this, and he has spoken about this, that trying to decide, or to feel, not decide, but feel, know, if something's true intuition, truly coming from an uplifted place, it is the hardest thing on the path. Because the mind, it's not just that it's constant. It is constant. I mean, this we've proven, actually with studies. I don't know the numbers, but how many thoughts somebody has in a minute or in a day, you realize it's why it's so hard to quiet the mind. But the ego is so good at making it seem like it's a real elevated, holier than thou, kind of uplifted question. And the ego just does that. I remember when I was raised in the 60s, and in the United States in the 60s, it was a time of people were finding ways to be free. It was an important time, actually. It was a time of women's lib. It was a time of people moving out of a lot of conventions that bound us rather than freeing us. It was a time of women becoming not just liberated. Women's lib got associated with things that weren't all that important. How low can your shirt be? How high can your skirt be? How few clothes can you wear? I mean, how big of a voice can you have? But it was the beginning of this movement into Apara, where we're able to think of souls in terms of energy and not so much male and female. So it was the beginning of all of that. And there was a lot of smoking of marijuana going on at the time. Not the way it is now. Now it's gotten to be, I think, more of an addiction and an illness. So people smoke marijuana now. It's a daily, all-day thing. Then it was, gee, we're going to go to a great music concert tonight. Let's smoke some marijuana. I mean, it was occasional. I smoked it occasionally. I never, fortunately, got so into it or hooked on it, but it was what was going on in those days. But one of the things that happened to a lot of people when they would get high with marijuana, I'm sure it still happens, I just haven't been around anybody for many decades, is they would start speaking philosophically, and they would hold the floor. And they were sure that they were saying something absolutely brilliant, that they were discovering answers, and they would, because it was the language of the day, hook it up to some spiritual teaching. Well, first of all, by the next day, nobody could remember what they said, including them. So it clearly wasn't coming from God. I mean, something that would have stayed with us. But often, it didn't really make any sense. And it's a perfect example that was drug-induced. But the ego does that. It talks to us in a way that it's so hard sometimes to know whether what is coming, what we're thinking, what we're talking about is ego-motivated garbage kind of stuff, or is it wisdom? You would think it would be perfectly clear, but it's not. And I think, particularly because some of us have brains that are a little more active, sometimes even perseverative, they just go over the same things, that we need to be very thoughtful and mindful about where all of that is coming from. If something's coming that's truly meant to be introspected on, felt, sat with, meditated on, you feel it in your heart chakra. You have a sense that it's elevated. It doesn't feel like busy work. And, introspection, which Patanjali calls self-study, and when you read about that, and he talks about self-honesty also. So if we can get honest with ourselves and say, if I sit with this, is it lifting me up or is it taking me to negative conclusions? Do I feel contracted? Do I feel anxious? Honestly, a lot of those questions, a lot of the doubt, a lot of the wondering, it does get cleared up because it becomes clearer than we might think, sooner than we might think. No, this feels meaningful. And it doesn't engage our mind. And that is a very important part of it. True introspection, we're offering up to God. We're not thinking about it, talking about it, trying to convince ourselves of it, making the pro and con arguments. That's what the mind does. What happens when we offer something up is we do just that. We offer it up at the beginning of meditation or whenever, and we wait and see, does a flash of realization come? And without engaging your mind more, detail by detail by detail, I think that's the best answer to that. Not so helpful sometimes because it's challenging, but it's, I think, still truth. It's much more simple when our divine self is revealing something to us. It's complicated when it's in our own mind. We're always making arguments. We spend a lot of time, I'm saying we, believe me, I live there a lot. And it's not a good use of our time. I hope that answers to some degree.